Again, 24 prisoners from 6 countries to be freed in exchange with the country of Russia. For more, let's bring in ABC's Patrick Revell, who will be joining us in just a moment. We are going to check in with the special report now.
We're going to ABC News special report.
I'm Whit Johnson in New York, and we're coming on the air because there's breaking news. We're getting word of potentially a massive prisoner exchange between the U.S. and Russia and possibly other countries that would involve Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan. They are expected soon to be in U.S. custody. Let's get right to our Chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, who has the latest. And Mary, I know this is a very fluid situation, but what can you tell us?
Whit, this is absolutely fluid and still developing. I can tell you what we do know right now is that after months and years of negotiations, we are told by a senior administration official that a prisoner transfer has been agreed to that does include the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and the former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan. We have also been told that they are expected to soon be in U.S. custody. Of course, we know this is something that this White House has been working on for a long time behind the scenes. Evan Gershkovich has been detained since March 2023 on those spy charges that he, the Wall Street Journal, and the U.S. all fiercely deny and say was a complete sham. He was sentenced, just last month to 16 years in a penal colony after that secret 3-day trial with absolutely no proof. And of course, Paul Whelan is that former U.S. Marine. He's been held for over 5.5 years. He's actually been left out of previous deals as the U.S. brought home other wrongfully detained Americans. The hope here is that he, too, is now going to be coming home with.
And Mary, we know that, remember when Brittany Griner was released and was able to come back to the U.S., that was in 2022, and those discussions really picked up since then with regards to Paul Whelan and then later Evan Gershkovich. What more do we know about those conversations behind the scenes between the U.S. and Russia and the other countries that perhaps could be involved in this?
Yeah, I suspect this is something that does involve many of our allies as well. But as you said, this has been an incredibly long time coming. This is something that we have heard the president speak out forcefully about, speaking out in defense, of course, of Evan and of Paul Whelan. So I suspect that this has taken a lot of tense negotiations behind the scenes. We don't know the details yet of what went into this, but we can report right now that Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan, according to a senior administration official, are part of this prison transfer and are expected to be soon, they hope, in U.S. custody.
And we all do. And of course, our thoughts to their families as well throughout this process. Mary Bruce, thank you so much. Of course, we'll have much more on our streaming channel, ABC News Live and abcnews.com. You can also get breaking news alerts with the ABC News app. Then we'll have a full wrap up tonight on World News Tonight. For now, I'm Whit Johnson in New York. Have a great day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
You're watching ABC News Live, special coverage of the biggest multi-country exchange of prisoners since the Cold War, including Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter, and U.S. Marine Paul Whelan. This exchange involves 24 prisoners in total in 6 countries. For more on this, let's bring in ABC's Patrick Revell, who has been following these detained Americans since the very beginning. Patrick, this is a massive prisoner exchange. It's been a long time coming. What's the latest? What can you tell us?
Hi, Stephanie. As you say, this is a massive prisoner exchange, the largest since the Cold War, and involving, as we understand, Paul Whelan, the former Marine who's been held for more than 5 years in Russia on espionage charges that the USA have fabricated, as well as Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter, also held on espionage charges that the U.S. and his paper have denied vehemently. Alongside them, we understand that another journalist, another American journalist, Alsu Kurmashova, who worked for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, will also be freed, along with, it should be said, a number of Russian political prisoners, including some of the best known. We understand that Vladimir Kara-Murza, who is arguably one of Russia's best known political prisoners now, following the death of Alexei Navalny, he's understood to be part of this exchange, along with a number of other very high-profile prisoners, potentially including Ilya Yashin, also one of Russia's best-known political prisoners. What we understand is that the U.S. is also releasing at least 3 Russians who have been held there, as well as other countries involved in this. As you said, it's a multi-country exchange, and that at the moment we understand that it's involving Slovenia, where 2 deep-cover Russian agents were tried in a court and were hurriedly there was a hurried court session just yesterday, in which they pled guilty to being deep-cover spies. It's understood that they are part of this exchange. It's also understood that another Russian agent will likely be traded from Norway, as well as also from Poland. Most of the figures being traded from the U.S. side are people convicted of spying, as well as criminal charges. Stephanie.
Patrick, thank you. I want to bring in foreign correspondent Tom Soufi-Burridge. Tom, I want to talk about the significance of this exchange. This is most likely a plan that was in place, or these negotiations were in the works for quite some time. How significant is it that this is actually happening?
Stephanie, this looks like an absolutely groundbreaking moment in historical terms. I mean, look, it's a moving story right now. We haven't got a lot of the details confirmed. We're hearing a hell of a lot of stuff right now. Some of the details are confirmed, like Evan Gershkovich to be freed, like Paul Whelan, the former Marine, also to be freed. What we can say, as Patrick said, is that, there are multiple countries involved. For example, we know yesterday a Russian couple accused of espionage, convicted of espionage, pleaded guilty yesterday in a Slovenian court. Apparently, according to Slovenian justice officials, they were living as Argentinians under the guise of Argentinians, frequenting NATO countries from Slovenia to work as Russian assets. So, that's just one tiny part of the puzzle right now. We know also that the Belarusian dictator Lukashenko pardoned a German citizen earlier in the week who was facing terrorism charges and facing the death penalty. We know Germany is certainly heavily involved. And we know on background, really, that a key person for Vladimir Putin to get home to Russia is a guy called Vadim Krasikov. We don't have absolute confirmation right now from US officials that he is part of the swap, but it's looking very, very possible, because Vladimir Putin has said in television interviews that he wanted Vadim Krasikov back. And actually, Krasikov was basically a Russian assassin, a former FSB agent. 5 years ago here in Berlin, in a park just over there, he had assassinated a Chechen rebel in broad daylight and was convicted and sentenced to life in prison here in Germany. So Germany, a key player, we believe. Big negotiations with the US, the other key player, but multiple countries involved. A very fluid picture right now. Some details confirmed. We'll get a lot more detail as the minutes and hours progress.
Tom, thank you. Patrick, what can you tell us about some of these individuals? You've been following Paul Whelan's story closely, also Evan Gershkovich's story. Tell us about what the backstory, what landed Evan in that Russian prison.
Yes, Stephanie. I mean, this is a remarkable swap. And as you say, we've been following a number of these cases since the beginning. I mean, Evan was a Moscow correspondent who was well known by correspondents like myself there, and who was arrested while on a reporting trip back in 2022 and was charged with espionage, which his colleagues and his newspaper and the U.S. government all vehemently denied. Paul Whelan really, though, was the beginning of what has been a campaign of hostage-taking. I remember back in late 2018 when he was first arrested and accused of spying. There hadn't been an American arrested and accused of spying like that since the Cold War. And at the time, it was extremely unusual. What was remarkable was that in the years that followed, it began to become almost not quite routine, but certainly it started to happen more and more commonly. And we saw it eventually with Brittany Griner, and we saw it with Trevor Reed, another American who was taken hostage by the Kremlin to use as bargaining chips. And basically that's what the U.S. has been saying, and the supporters of these people who've been taken, is that they are part of this Kremlin campaign to take people hostage, to use them as bargaining chips to try and get Russians released. And that's been one of the challenges. Paul Whelan has been left behind several times in previous prisoner swaps. And obviously that has been agonizing for his family. He was passed over when Brittany Griner was released, for example. And so the U.S. for years now has been trying to come up with a deal that would allow them to free him as well recently as Evan Gershkovich. It seems finally that they have managed to do this in this what appears to be very, very large prisoner swap. Stephanie?
And we know that just recently the UN working group had said that that Russia failed to demonstrate any sufficient evidence, any reasons to justify the decision to hold Evan Gershkovich in that prison. Tom, the Biden administration has been negotiating to get Whelan and Gershkovich home for a really long time. What can you tell us about how this deal came about? Patrick, I want to pose that question to you. We don't have Tom at the moment. Patrick, I would imagine that this deal was in the works for quite some time, probably several months, where, of course, this is still a very fluid situation. We're not exactly sure the details, but what can you tell us about the back and forth between the U.S. and Russia in trying to get Paul Whelan and Evan Gershkovich home?
Yes, Stephanie. I mean, in terms of trying to free Paul Whelan, there's been negotiations for years at this stage. And as I say, he was passed over in a number of previous prisoner exchanges. And really, since very early on, after Evan Gershkovich's arrest, the U.S. has been signaling publicly that it's been trying to free him. And the Russians also have been publicly indicating that they wanted a prisoner exchange. Vladimir Putin himself repeatedly publicly said who he even wanted in this exchange. This FSB assassin, this man who was convicted of being an FSB assassin in Germany. And so, clearly the length of time this has taken is because it has been very difficult for the U.S. to find Russians that they are willing to make a trade. And this has been a problem all the way through. In the past, they were finding that Russia was grabbing people like Brittany Griner, for example, who, are effectively innocent, simply tourists visiting. And basically the Russians would then be asking for criminals or for people convicted of very serious crimes or people convicted of being spies. And for a long time, the U.S. found it very difficult to make these trades. So this time they appear to have come up with a much broader exchange that seems to allow them to feel comfortable with trying to free Evan Gershkovich as well as Paul Whelan and others. Stephanie.
And Patrick, we understand that from a senior administration official that both men are in a position where they are expected to be in U.S. custody very, very soon. I can only imagine how these families are feeling. Just a moment of relief and gratitude after so many years being without their loved ones. You've been in contact with the families of these detained Americans. What have they been telling you throughout this ordeal?
Yeah, I've been covering these sorts of cases now for sort of half a decade, really, which is how long Paul Whelan has been kept in prison in Russia. And I've seen firsthand how incredibly painful it is for families, just the immense uncertainty, and also this appalling weight that you feel where you must do something to get these people out. But there's no way that you can as a family except to make noise. There's no way to influence, of course, the Kremlin to release them. And I know also personally that for Evan's friends, and he's a very popular guy among Moscow correspondents. He's a brilliant reporter and a very good friend to people. And it's been appalling for them to see this as well, and they've been campaigning very hard. There's been a remarkable campaign by Evan's friends to release him. But, they have constantly tried to draw attention to his case. They've translated letters, thousands of letters, to get to him in prison while he's been held there. And so, I think this has been something that they've been praying for every single day. And I'm sure it's very surreal right now for them to see that hopefully this is what is happening now.
And Tom, as Patrick mentioned, Paul Whelan, for instance, had been passed up a number of times when these prisoner swaps had taken place. Talk to us about his background. He had been in prison for 5 years. Tell us why he was arrested and what he was doing in that country, in Russia.
Yeah, so Paul Whelan has dual citizenship. He's a British citizen, also a U.S. citizen. Look, he was arrested when he was attending the birthday party of a friend in Russia. He was a businessman, he and his family say, and he was wrongfully detained. And he's been in prison, as you say, for 5 years. I mean, he's really experienced a rough time. I mean, Patrick knows this well. I mean, the conditions in Russian prisons, Russian penal colonies are absolutely atrocious. It's very rare that cameras and journalists get in there, and if you watch the rare documentaries that there have been, I mean, you really get a sense of, hellish conditions. And Paul's family have told ABC News over the course of the last year or two that at one point he was apparently beaten up by an inmate. So, you can just imagine the fear that he's had to live through. And just picking up on what Patrick said about Evan Gershkovich, I mean, he's 32, right? He's one of us. I mean, he's a reporter. He goes out into these he was living in a country which went to war with Ukraine, illegally invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, and he stayed. A lot of Russian-based journalists, I think, for some of them it was a sensible decision, they got out. Evan stayed, and in the eyes of the White House, and I think a lot of analysts around the Western world, it's quite clear Russia has had a deliberate policy to target people like Evan Gershkovich because of his U.S. citizenship. Anyone with a link to a Western country has been vulnerable, and they've picked up a lot of people, and they're using them as political capital. And as we anticipate that they are in this prisoner swap going to get some fairly valuable assets, Russian assets, out of Western countries in exchange. And my final point, I think, just to ram it home to people, if they haven't really watched Evan Gershkovich's journey over the last few months in and out of prison, I mean, go back to those videos, look at him smiling calmly, even when this, sham trial, which all of his friends, his employer, the White House agree clearly was, and it ended up being a secret trial as well. He's there in the dock often when we were able to see him smiling, relaxed, talking to the few Western journalists who still remain in Moscow. So an incredible story. I'm sure this day, the events that we're going to see pan out over the next few hours, people should really stay with us in the coming minutes and hours, because it is really quite a story, I think, that we're going to be able to tell in more depth and detail. There will be books written about this, and there will be probably movies made, and I think most of us will want to watch and read some of that when it eventually comes out.
It's certainly historic. And Tom, some critics have voiced concerns about the Biden administration agreeing to these types of exchanges, saying it could encourage Putin to detain more Americans. So what's at stake here?
Well, I think that, that sort of criticism, I mean, that's a double-edged sword, really, isn't it? I mean, look, the U.S. government, it has a duty, like any government around the world, for its citizens, and its citizens in particular who are detained abroad, and in particular for citizens who are detained abroad for political reasons. And, that's why the U.S. government, whatever administration is in charge in the White House, has a duty, and the Biden administration has been pursuing this. I mean, they have been adamant over the last few months that this has been a top priority for the President Biden, meeting with the families of Paul Whelan, of Evan Gershkovich, on a number of occasions. And, we know that his point man on national security, Jake Sullivan, has really been taking the lead on this one. And we know it has not been straightforward. We've heard a lot of reporting over the last few months, something that we might be able to confirm in the coming hours, that there have been setbacks. This has not been smooth sailing. It hasn't been an easy process. And just to reiterate to people, this is, we anticipate, going to be a big prisoner swap, a very big one, potentially. I think the details haven't been confirmed yet, but it's looking like a historic day.
And for those who are just joining us, want to catch you up here, the U.S. is preparing for the biggest multi-country exchange of prisoners since the Cold War. 24 prisoners in total. That's involving 6 different countries. Coming to the U.S. are Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter who has been held in a prison there in Russia, Paul Whelan, who has been jailed for 5 years in Russia, Alsu Kumasheva, a Radio Free Europe reporter, Vladimir Kara-Murza, a legal permanent resident. There are another 12 political prisoners coming out of Russia that have German citizenship. Want to check in with Patrick Revel, who has been on this story, has communicated with the families of these individuals for quite some time. Patrick, broadly, what does Vladimir Putin stand to gain from exchanges like this?
Hi, Stephanie. I mean, I think, first of all, the main thing is he wants people back. He specifically wants Russians held in Western countries, usually held on spying charges, in exchange. And in the past, he's succeeded in getting them. For Brittany Griner, he got back Victor Boot, who was a famous arms dealer and was held in the U.S. for more than 12 years. I think that was an interesting case because there it was more about propaganda. I think that's the other side of this. It allows Putin to say, look, I brought our people home. But I think most of all, one of the reasons why the Kremlin often wants to try and get people back who are held as spies is that it's about saying that we will get you home, because they need to be able to create this sense among people people who are willing to spy for Russia, that, we have your back. But I think the problem the U.S. has always faced is that Russia finds it very easy to take innocent people hostage, to take tourists as prisoners, and then demand that people convicted of serious crimes and often suspected of having ties to Russian intelligence, and basically ask them in exchange. And so we'll wait, and, I think hopefully in the coming hours we'll be able to report who precisely Vladimir Putin is receiving. Putin has made clear for months who he wanted back in exchange for Evan Gershkovich, and that was a Russian man held in Germany who was convicted of assassinating a Kremlin opponent, a former Chechen field commander. This man's name is Vadim Krasikov, and who has been held for a couple of years now in a German prison on these charges of being an assassin for Russia's intelligence agency, the FSB. And so, these are the sorts of people that Putin would like to get back.
And Tom, you're currently in Berlin. Let's talk about the response kind of around the world, or what we've seen so far at least. What kind of responses are we seeing from the international community?
Well, I think at the moment, Stephanie, it's important to sort of underline that this is really kind of breaking in real time. So we have a lot of details. Some of it we can go public with right now. Some of it we're being careful about publishing right now, given that this is a sensitive prisoner swap. And obviously, as a media organisation, a responsible media organisation, we don't want to say or do anything that could jeopardise that. But I mean, look, everything's going to come out in good time. I mean, look, there isn't a much official reaction from governments right now. We have got that US official saying that Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan will be freed in this major prisoner swap. Look, we again, just to reiterate to people, there's been a sequence of events. This hasn't kind of started today. We've been studying it quite closely. We picked up on signs. I mean, on a more anecdotal level, on the Flight Radar 24 app website, you can see strange movements of aircraft, Russian state aircraft. We also know that the lawyers of some Russian political prisoners being held in Russian jails have said to journalists that they don't know about the whereabouts of their clients within the last 24, 48 hours. And we also know about the case of that Russian couple in Slovenia who all of a sudden yesterday in a Slovenian court pleaded guilty to espionage charges. And according to the Slovenian judicial system, they were using Slovenia as a base to frequent NATO countries and work as Russian spies. So there's lots of moving parts here right now.
Lots of moving parts, lots of information that we still don't have yet. A very fluid situation, as Tom just mentioned. Our thanks to Tom Sufi-Burge there in Berlin and Patrick Reville as well. We will have more on this major breaking news when we come back. Stay with us.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
We are part of an operation.
Is this our combat operations center?
We're approaching the gate. Militants came in from different directions.
Nuclear reactor.
So you have a couple loaded and ready to go.
The house is destroyed, but the flag...
Not a tear in it.